Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California, this is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today you are tuning into my monthly segment, Spell It Out, Magic, Reflections, and Shadows, where I get to pick a topic and run with it. Today I'm going to continue my topic of divination for the year with a more obscure form of divination, and it's called Arachnomancy, and is divination using spiders. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our show again. We've got some really great guests coming up this month. Next week, we have author Brandy Williams, who was on our occult panel just recently. And she's going to be talking about the woman. She's the author of The Woman Magician, so we'll be talking about women in ceremonial magic. The following week, we have Dr. George Schwimmer back to do the second part of his show on doppelganger and whether Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy or whether it was an impersonator. And then finally, we have Jason Miller, our new friend who was also on the occult panel, who's an occult author and esoteric author, and we're excited to have him on. So some super shows coming up this month, especially for all of you that are into magic and esoteric stuff, occult stuff. This is a good month for you guys. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SAXTH, all spelled out. And while you're there, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi if you can afford to. It helps us a little with our production cost. And if you can't, we love you anyway and keep tuning in. And we're just having a lot of fun with the show. And you can subscribe to our newsletter. We should have one coming out this week, I hope. And then let us, comment. We'll have the chat up during the show. If you have any comments or questions for Krista, let her know. And I'm not going to take up any more of your time because we have a short show this week. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I am really looking forward to this month's shows as well. So before we get started, sometimes I like to start with a little astrology, which I have not been doing. And what I only wanted to do was mention very briefly that we are moving into what some people call sort of the retrograde planet period, where quite a few of the outer planets go retrograde for, several months or more. And I wanted to remind you that this is an annual event, and that the outer planets move more slowly and the retrogrades can be longer, and not to believe everything you read about it that's very dramatic and this kind of shift is going to happen. Here's a couple of things to think about in terms of retrograde in general, and this is based on my research so far. Remember, it's a motion and it's a process. So that means you want to see where whatever planet is retrograding is appearing in your natal chart, but particularly also noting if it's aspecting your sun. There is actually an astronomical connection to the sun and retrograde planets, which at some point maybe I'll explain it a little more in depth. So remember that. And also there's this whole concept of time connected to retrograde. So for instance, it goes both forward and backwards in the sense that you can also see it as a futuristic kind of energy. I think it's Schulman that explains what that means in his book on retrograde planets. But what I did this time when Saturn turned retrograde is I looked back previously when Saturn was in retrograde in the sign it is now, and I'm doing research based on that. So I'm going way back, like almost 30 years in time, to see what the themes are and why it's going through the same house, and if there's something I can learn, because in a way, retrograde is getting you to focus on points in your chart because it goes over it. So it's a process, it's a motion, it's related to time. You're not going to get the full benefit if you don't go a little deeper with it and stay away from the memes about it. So that's my own little rant about retrogrades. So anyway, and I may go into it a little bit more next month to sort of, as we're getting closer to Brad Cronin's going to come on hopefully in August and talk about Pluto in the United States chart. And so I'll talk about that as well, maybe a little before that. So let's get on to the topic. And I picked this topic, a little randomly. I was looking for something a little more obscure in divination. And so I found Arachnomancy, which you can see is got the same front words as a spider. So we've got it's divinations using live spiders. And from what I can tell, largely spiders that you either watch or catch temporarily. So they're in the wild. And I haven't found any that kill spiders. In fact, the opposite of that is true. They rever the spiders because they are connected to divining. So I chose it because I have spider as one of my totems, I feel, in my own life. And I was originally introduced to the Hopi notion, which we're going to talk about later, of grandmother's spider weaving creation. And I also had a very sort of, good view of spiders in general because of the book Charlotte's Web when I was a little girl. I think that's a very endearing book. And so that, I'm not to say I can just go and pick up a tarantula, but I've sort of not really been so afraid of the spiders the way, Hollywood depicts them. So that's why I picked it, sort of out of, homage to my spider totem. And so, as I said, the brief definition is they use either the real spider, and they'll use some objects, we'll talk about it, and cards made out of leaves, or they will, some cultures put spiders like in jars temporarily or in boxes and see if they'll spin a web. And so, or they look at their webs and their motions. So they're watching nature, in a sense, all the ones that I have seen so far in my research. And so some examples of cultures that have spider divination. This was from occultworld.com. And I have quite a few long links in this show that I'm just going to post under the comments. They're going to be too long to say where I got my sources. But occultworld.com is kind of good for quick little things. I really like it. And so they have, on that site, they said it's connected to, for instance, central and northern Peru. And there, they say the ancient pre-Columbian civilizations had many spider diviners, and they would interpret how the spider would move and displace cocoa leaves when placed in a jar. This concept of displacing things is also taken further, we'll see, in Africa. And then in China, supposedly on the 7th day of the 7th month, the court ladies would catch spiders and put them in incense boxes. Couldn't get that out. And then on the next day, they would open the box, and if there were spiders had spun a thick web, that was considered to be a very good omen. If they didn't do anything, that was a bad omen. So it's kind of a vague way of divination, whereas you'll see other cultures have very specific results from their divining. And then, as I said, the ones I'm going to focus on the most come from two people in Africa. I found a site on an article on era.anthropology, and it's called The Anthropological Studies of Divination and Spider Divination for the Mambilla people of Nigeria and Cameroon. And then I also found chapter 4 of the book by Herman Guffler, Affliction and Moral Order, Conversations in Yamba land. So it's the Yamba people. And those are the two I'm going to draw from today because they had the most interesting, detailed, fascinating use of spiders in divination. So one of the reasons, for instance, for that they would have there were actually many reasons why, for instance, the Yamba people would go to these men largely, I think they are men only, that were the spider diviners. And they actually still do this today, that are spider diviners. The reasons were what you might think in a lot of ways. So the main ones were sickness and death, others crop failure, business failure, theft, barrenness, suspected witchcraft, selection of a new chief, and traveling. So that was some of the reasons they go to these diviners. And the diviners themselves usually were trained, and it's considered to be something you can learn, and you don't have to be a gifted person, like have a clairvoyance or some psychic ability. But it does look like it takes some time to understand how to interpret what the spider does. So let's get into some of how both the Mambilla people and the Yamba people use real spiders. And from what I can tell so far, the spider that they looked for is the Western African earth spider. And so they look for the holes that these spiders are in, and they'll find, one out in the wild, and then they clear the vegetation in front of it. And then largely this is going to be sort of a brief and quick examination of what they do. And when I put the links below, I highly recommend you actually go and read some of this if you're interested, because it's really in depth and really fascinating, but I won't have time to go through every little detail. But basically they have these sticks or sticks and stones that they place there in front of the hole, and then a pot that has it's open at the end, and then they have these cards made from leaves. They're actually leaves, and they put words on the leaves. And what they're trying to do is set it up so that the spider will come out and basically knock these leaves in some direction, like against the stone or stick. And then depending on which of the leaves are knocked around with the words on it, they take each of the words and interpret it in a very detailed way. So you're going to get not just, is this a good thing or a bad thing, but you get advice, very particular advice on what to do about it. And what I liked was at the site with the chapter by Geffler, the man who collected this information in the field, he gives an example of one of the diviners. And it's got about 12 different points in it with each of the words, and how based on how it first laid against these sticks. And the sticks in this case represented like all of the people involved in it that could be involved in it. And so then he goes and interprets it, and to the point where you get very detailed answers. And what was interesting, in two of the examples he gave, they turned out to be true, which surprised the man collecting the data, because one involved him, I think it had to do with he's a priest or something, and he wanted to build a church. And so the diviner looked into which people would actually accept a church, and it turned out to be true. And he gave the reasons why too, which all turned out to be true later. So it's not a very light thing that you're looking at. It's actually really fascinating. And the other thing I really found fascinating about the African spider diviners is they see the spider. One reason they view the spider as being able to divine is they see in that moment that the spider is a god and can only tell the truth. So it's very bad to kill a spider. So you wouldn't do that. So they don't just see the spider as a messenger, but it has its own intelligence and own ability to also make decisions. And you see this in the United States in the Southwest Indian legends, like of a Spider Woman, where Spider Woman is a goddess who created the universe. And I'm going to kind of get to that in a few minutes. And I was fascinated because it's so connected to the earth and respect for the earth. And it made me wonder if that is one reason why the spider in the United States became more of, mostly through literature and Hollywood, a scary demonic force, as if, almost like a way to put down the earth religions without, I don't know if it was deliberate or unconscious, but it made me think that, because wow, what a difference. You have these cultures that revere spiders, that actually cultivate these relationships with spiders. And then you have the opposite, depicted in a lot of movies and even my beloved Tolkien, So it's just a thought to think about, and to, see that a lot of times what we attribute to creatures is not really backed up through other cultures. So that was the main one that I got very fascinated with. Obviously, it might be kind of difficult for us to do that. But one of the things, a lot of people that, don't want to have, to kill things in excess, that if you don't have to kill something, then don't, So in Buddhism, I'm taught that. And so I usually try to rescue spiders, release them. I have a couple I let live in my bathroom because I feel they're good for, keeping the cockroaches out, and they are, and they're in a little corner, and I know they're not deadly. And I know everyone has to, make their own decisions about insects in their home, but I've found it, interesting and fascinating to kind of watch them as well. And in that way you can sort of begin to have your own relationship with the spider as a conscious being and a creature that deserves respect and treatment respectfully as well. And certainly I'm not going to say you can't kill a spider if it's going to, attack you and it's poisonous or something like that. Though there are people that know how to handle that. I don't know if I would be able to, but I would say just even thinking about spiders differently is helpful in the long range and according to, ecology and how we treat the earth. So the other reason, like I said earlier, I picked the spider divination is because I really, really like that Hopi legend that I learned through the medicine cards by Jamie Sams and David Carson. And the legend, there's a lot of different versions of the legend. So I picked the one I picked, I really liked, was from the site firstpeople.us. And basically in this version, Spider Woman herself, and she's also called Ko Kwang Wuti, is created, and then she creates these two twins to help create different parts of the world. And so one she creates on the right is Po Kangwawa, and this one, he basically solidifies his places on the earth with his hands, like mountains and things like that. And then the one on the left, Pal Angawahoya, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing these wrong because I couldn't find a way to pronounce them on the internet, but I wanted to try out of respect. And basically this one is really fascinating, and you'll see in a minute why I thought it was fascinating, is because this one is connected to sound. And he makes the whole world an instrument of sound. And so then Spider Woman went on to create all the other things like trees, bushes, flowers, creatures, animals, birds. And what I loved in this version was the description of her creation. She would mold them out of earth and cover each with her white substance cape of wisdom and sing over them. So I thought that was really beautiful. The idea of bringing creation into the world through singing over the different birds and animals and plants and trees. And then in the medicine cards, the spider card is associated with languages and with writing itself. So those are just some that I learned. And so I really loved the Hopi story. And I know she figures a lot, the grandmother spider, in many other stories in the Hopi. And I believe also the Navajo have some connection to Spider Woman, some of the other tribes in the Southwest. So what I also was fascinated by was about a month ago, I had come across separately before I thought of this show, this really interesting video where an MIT researcher, Dr. Marcus Buehler, was doing research with spider webs. And what they have done is they have, because of the three-dimensional element of the webs, the cobwebs, they have scanned them using lasers into these 3D models. And they've also, I didn't quite understand the technology, but the spiders basically, their language is vibration on the web. And so they don't really see well. And so they've basically created music connected to spiders on the web and doing different things on the web. And so now you can go and hear this. If you Google it in, you hear these beautiful musical sounds that are connected to vibrating spider webs. And each different vibration means something different, like a prey has landed. But the music is very haunting and eerie and beautiful. And also they believe that by studying these 3D cobwebs that they will be able to improve 3D printing. So I was blown away by the fact that the Hopi legend foresaw that real spiders can actually help with creation. I mean, this is where you start to really see that we're overlooking a lot of what we consider to be legends or maybe just myths, that there's actually real information in why a lot of indigenous peoples saw ants and bees and birds and trees as living creatures that basically have their own powers and affect all of creation. And they're equal to us. They're not lesser or we're not more. So I thought that was just really, really special and really beautiful. And I totally think you should go and listen to what they sound like online. I was totally blown away. And I think it's fairly recent that this research has been done. So that was basically what I wanted to mention, I think, largely about the different, the little bit I found, the differences in spider divination. I also wanted to share, one of the things I've forgotten to do over the last 2 shows is I wanted to share a spell each time. And in the past, I've shared spells that I've done, and this one I have not done, but I think it has some merit, and I'll sort of tell you why. And I got this from that great encyclopedia of 5,000 spells by Giudica Isles. So it's really, actually, I bought it years ago for my library, and I started cracking it open when I started doing this show, and it's got tons of interesting information about spells and cultures. And so I looked up spider, and I found under Animal Magic Wealth Spells, the Golden Spider Spell. Now, this one does not require a real spider, but it does require that you draw. So I like the beginning of it. So here's a quote at the beginning of the spell. The golden money spider weaves a web of riches. As the old saying, if you wish to live and thrive, let the spider stay alive, reminds us killing a spider is considered detrimental to one's own good fortune. So even in this spell book, you're not supposed to kill spiders. So anyway, in this spell, you start by drawing a picture of a spider hidden in its labyrinth on red paper with gold ink. So I didn't quite understand how you would draw the spider hidden in a labyrinth, but I think you could probably just draw a spider in any way you want. But I think the red paper with the gold ink is important. And then you place this picture. You're going to keep this for, it looks like indefinitely. So it's almost like a little altar to the spider. You place the picture in a corner with a saucer underneath it. And then you toss a few coins into the saucer, and you make some sort of invocation. So you just speak from your heart and you express your needs to the spider. And then once a week, or whenever the spider comes through for you, this is what I wanted to mention, you toss a few more coins onto the plate. So I think it's a lovely idea. I think it could totally work. I think it's a lot of fun because it allows your creativity. But this idea that when the spider comes through for you fascinated me, because when I was preparing for the show, I all of a sudden started having more connections to spiders. And I was out like on my bike, and I love to take pictures of the murals in Los Angeles, especially ones in alleys that don't stay very long. They come and go, and they're not by sort of famous artists. And there was a mural I was drawn to, and beside it, I didn't see it initially, was basically a spider with an hourglass on it, a black widow. And I thought, well, that's cool. And by the way, I don't see a lot of spiders. It's not like, whereas, I might see a lot of seagulls or something in my area. So I thought that was a very cool coincidence. And the other thing I have noticed since I embraced the concept of the totems, and spider is one of the totems for me for my West. And every time I feel like when I'm not paying attention to certain parts of my goals, or I need to do something that's spider related, I see this big plump spider, and I don't know what the kind is. I keep meaning to try to figure out, but it's not uncommon, but I don't see it all the time. And I'll see one somewhere on my path, and it always looks like the spider is about to lecture me. And I know, even at the time, I know, okay, Krista, this is a projection. But it's so interesting because I feel the spider telling me, come on, you know what spider medicine is. You need to be doing your spider work. So go ahead and go and do it. And I haven't seen them for quite a while, so I must be doing okay recently. But I have also, as I said, I've cultivated a relationship now more with spiders on my porch, in my bathroom. I try to honor them. I try to let them be. I watch them because they're actually quite fascinating. For instance, one time I saw a bunch of daddy longlegs on the ceiling of our porch, and they all got together and they were doing what looked like push-ups. And I have the video, so I still have to figure out what they were actually doing. There were about 4 of them. And that's the only time I've ever seen it. So, watching spiders, if nothing else, is far more entertaining than you can possibly imagine. But try that spell. I thought, we're still coming out of the pandemic. I thought maybe this would be anything to help build wealth might be good for people, because that's what I've sort of done more of, I noticed this year. But also this was kind of the best spell to do for the show. I couldn't find too many others that really related to spiders. And as I said earlier, it seems like anything connected to spider divination, I didn't read anything where spiders were killed, though I do know sometimes tarantulas, when they shed their skins, people have pet tarantulas will take the skin of that tarantula and use it in potions and charms. And I think that's perfectly fine. Obviously, it's just the skin. In fact, I think I have a little bit from a little friend of ours in Nova Scotia, Billy. He had a tarantula and he gave me a little bit of the skin when the tarantula, or maybe he just worked somewhere. I don't know how he got it, but he had the skin of a tarantula. So I have a little bit at home in case I ever need it for something. So that's briefly a little bit about the arachnomancy. I thought it was really fascinating. There's lots of other forms of divination. I wanted to also mention, I don't know if I've mentioned recently, that Michael and I have returned to doing readings in person at our home. And you can book us through our website, mysticraven.net. And the only thing we ask is that you have proof of vaccination to come at home. We're, of course, still considering doing remote readings, phone readings, Skype readings, and Zoom. And I've also returned in person for just 2 shifts a week at the Mystic Journey bookstore, which is now located on Main Street in Santa Monica. So I'm there on Fridays and Mondays, and you can always call the bookstore there to find out my schedule. It's a very cute location, so if you're in the area, I highly recommend you visit that little location. It's got a little pizza place, and then there's coffee and some nice restaurants, and plus Jeff Siegel, the owner of Mystic Journey Bookstore and the Crystal Store, he put the stores together now. They're side by side so that you can also go and see his amazing large crystals that he goes and buys. And we did a show on it actually very early on in the Sixth Sense Society. You can always go look it up, Jeff Siegel. So I hope this helps you to really embrace the concept of the spider. I was talking to my husband earlier, and I think that insects are kind of coming into their own in terms of the scientists seeing that a lot of what indigenous people have been saying is there's some truth in it, whether it's ants or bees and spiders. And I think that this is really a wonderful thing, because the more we understand about the complexity of ecology, the more we will hopefully treasure our earth and start, taking care of it in a way that is just more conscious of the impact it has on everything. So that is one reason I personally like to work with the totem system, because it really does make you a naturalist, and it gets you to think about not just the myths and legends, but the real creatures. And so I really hope you do your own research. If you're interested in the spiders, if you're afraid of spiders, it's also good to look at your fears. I know people that have conquered their fear of spiders, arachnophobia, and can now pick up spiders. So it's definitely something you can move beyond. So I think that I'm going to close out a little bit early today, and I look forward to seeing you next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a wonderful week and a great future, since we're talking about divination.